All right, today we are going to talk about the Greco-Roman philosophers, and we are going to start with Socrates because he taught a couple people, so I'll tell you which ones he taught and kind of where his ideas went off to. But we're going to start with him, even though he's not the first one on there. He was an Athenian philosopher. He tutored Plato. He pretty much urged, he got to the point of moral reasoning. So his main focus was trying to reason things and rationalize and talk things out and question. So that's where we get the Socratic method, which I know you all have done in English class, where you're sitting there, you're asking questions, you're discussing, you're talking, you're trying to form reason out of something that you all have been reading or something you've been talking about. So identify the core of them. So I'm going to actually write reason. He was very into reasoning. And so he actually taught Plato. So we're going to go down to Plato. So he's a pupil of Socrates, and he went along with the same ideas of human reason, but he kind of went into more of like what's good, what's evil, what's justice, and how do we rationalize those things. So that was really important when we got to talking about law codes, and when we talked about, before with Hammurabi's code, is it justice to kill someone if they kill somebody else? Is it justice if you cut off somebody's hand for stealing? Those kind of things, the eye for an eye. So he kind of questioned those. And then Plato taught Aristotle. So he was a pupil of Plato, and he kind of wrote on a lot of different things, but it all had to come down to reason. So all of these guys, which I'm going to erase this, all of these guys had to do with reason. Finding reason in life, in everything. But Aristotle was actually, he taught Alexander the Great, which is important. Taught Alexander the Great. So he was pretty important when it came to big decisions. He was a big influence on the whole Greek experience, if you can say it like that. He kind of believed in voiding extremes of behavior, so trying to regulate yourself and kind of look internally at certain things. So he really believed that if you had too little courage, you were a coward, but too much, you're a little foolhardy. So the idea, you need to be more middle ground when it comes to your emotions and those kind of things. He also believed in observation and evidence of the senses, so using all of your senses to observe things is where we get into science, like you all have done in science before. What does it smell like? What does it taste like? How can we form those things and use that as evidence to make a rational observation? So that's where those ideas kind of come from. And then we have Cicero, which I'm going to do him in a different color because he's a philosopher, but he kind of focused more on political life. He was a lawyer, so he helped with law codes. He was a senator at one point. He was an orator, which means a very good speaker. And he was also a stoic, which a stoic kind of has to do with moral independence and kind of like a discipline of the body and the mind, and it has to do with bravery. So that's where the ideas kind of bled into Spartan ideas, where we get the military society. So a lot of that has to do with that. So that means the inner moral independence with strict discipline of the body and personal bravery. So he had a lot to do with that. In science, there wasn't a lot of new scientific discoveries. They didn't really conduct experiments because they more or less wanted to sit down and kind of talk about it and reason through and try to understand the overall ideas of it and not actually get into it and do it. They questioned a lot of questions of the universe. There were some advances, but then we had Ptolemy. We had his Earth-centered universe, which we know is not true, which is called a geocentric theory. So if it's heliocentric, which is what we believe now, it means sun-centered. So this is where there was some question about, is it Earth-centered? Are we sun-centered? They're questioning the universe. They're questioning more about what's around us, because they know that there's more out there than just what's on Earth. So we're going to wrap up here. Make sure you do the notes on the Greek philosophers. Try to organize your information in a way that works for you. And we're going to talk about this more tomorrow or whenever I see you. And make sure if you have any questions while you're taking these notes, I have a Google Doc for questions that I'm going to have up, and I'm going to try to look at it around 6 o'clock every night so that I can answer some of your questions, or just email me and I will answer the best that I can. So make sure you take your notes, and I'll see you next class.